Hello, guys.
The blood from Jonathan Jack Cross's split lip hadn't hit the Arizona dust when the satellite beacon in his jacket pocket began transmitting coordinates to a classified frequency that hadn't been used in 3 years. The biker's steel-toed boot caught the 71-year-old veteran square in the ribs, sending him sprawling across the cracked sidewalk outside Murphy's Pharmacy. Dust clouds swirled around Jack's weathered face as he gasped for air, his Vietnam vet cap tumbling into the gutter. "That's what you get for running your mouth, old man," the biker snarled, his leather vest displaying the skull insignia of the Desert Wolves MC. Tank Morrison, 6'4" of prison muscle and crystal meth paranoia, stood over Jack like a predator savoring his kill. The small crowd of onlookers shifted uncomfortably, their eyes finding fascinating details in the pavement. The teenage cashier from inside the pharmacy pressed her face against the window, her hands shaking as she held her phone. Nobody moved to help. Jack's fingers found the small device in his inner pocket, a titanium beacon no larger than a key fob, gifted to him by his former unit 3 Christmases ago. He'd sworn he'd never use it. The inscription read, "For when the cavalry needs to come home. Semper Fi, boss." Without hesitation, he pressed the button. 15 minutes. That's all it took for Jack's past to catch up with his present. The distinctive whop-whop-whop of rotor blades echoed off the desert mountains surrounding Pine Creek, Arizona. 2 Blackhawks appeared on the horizon, flying in tight formation. The small crowd outside the pharmacy looked up in confusion, shielding their eyes from the afternoon sun. Tank Morrison was still ranting about government handouts and worthless old soldiers when the helicopters touched down in the parking lot of the abandoned Kmart across the street. Dust devils erupted in their wake, sending tumbleweeds spinning across the asphalt. 8 figures emerged from the aircraft, men moving with the fluid precision of a well-oiled machine. They wore civilian clothes, but their bearings screamed military. Combat boots, tactical sunglasses, and the kind of purposeful stride that comes from years of walking into hostile territory. Sergeant First Class Miguel Harper, now a private military contractor, led the formation. His weathered face bore the scar of an IED blast that Jack had pulled him from in Kandahar 2009. Behind him walked Staff Sergeant Marcus Doc Williams, former Special Forces medic, current CEO of a veteran-owned security firm. The others fell into practiced formation: Torres, Rodriguez, Kim, Patel, Burke, and Johnson. Each carried their own debt to the man lying bloodied on the sidewalk. Tank's bravado evaporated as the aide approached. His drug-addled brain couldn't process what he was seeing. "What the hell?" "Step away from the general." Harper's voice carried the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed without question. "General?" Tank laughed nervously. "That's just some broken-down—" The laugh died in his throat as Doc Williams produced a set of flex cuffs and Torres moved to flank him. In 30 seconds, Tank Morrison found himself face down on the hot asphalt, his arms secured behind him, wondering how his afternoon had gone so spectacularly wrong. Jack accepted Harper's outstretched hand and slowly got to his feet. His ribs screamed in protest, but he'd endured worse, much worse. "Sir," Harper said quietly, "are you hurt?" "I'm fine, Miguel, just feeling my age." Jack's voice carried the quiet authority that had once commanded 1,000 soldiers across 2 theaters of war. The crowd was growing now, phones appearing like flowers after rain. Someone was live streaming. Within minutes, the footage would go viral, an old man's humiliation transformed into something else entirely. Mayor Patricia Hendricks arrived in a flutter of panic and political calculation. She'd received a call about possible domestic terrorism and military aircraft in civilian airspace. What she found instead was a scene that would define the rest of her political career. "What exactly is happening here?" she demanded, her voice carrying the shrill note of someone used to being the most important person in any room. Harper turned to face her, his expression neutral. "Ma'am, we're providing assistance to a distinguished veteran who was assaulted by this individual." He gestured toward Tank, who was now sitting sullenly against a patrol car that had arrived moments earlier. "And you are?" "Sergeant First Class Harper, ma'am, U.S. Army, retired." Mayor Hendricks looked at the helicopters, the tactical formation, the way these men moved with lethal efficiency through her quiet desert town. This seems like considerable resources for a simple altercation. It was then that her aide, fresh from Googling military insignia, whispered something in her ear. Her face went pale. You're General Jonathan Cross? The General Cross?" The crowd fell silent. Even Tank stopped struggling against his restraints. Jack straightened slightly, and for a moment, the weight of his years seemed to fall away. "I haven't been called that in some time." "Distinguished Service Cross, 2004, Doc Williams said, his voice carrying across the parking lot. "Purple Heart with 2 oak leaf clusters. Bronze Star with Valor device. He pulled 47 soldiers out of an ambush in Kabul, stayed behind to provide covering fire while the last helicopter lifted off. He saved my life," Torres added simply. "Mine too," said Rodriguez. One by one, each of the 8 men recounted their debt. A firefight in Mosul, a roadside bomb in Helmand, a rescue mission gone wrong in Syria. Each story painted the picture of a leader who had earned loyalty not through rank but through sacrifice. The crowd was captivated now. This wasn't just about an old man being bullied. This was about honor, service, and the invisible bonds that tie warriors together across time and distance. Jack raised his hand, and his men fell silent. "I didn't call you here for me," he said, his voice carrying clearly in the desert air. "I called you here so that everyone who might think about raising a hand to a veteran, any veteran, knows that we take care of our own." The implications hung in the air like heat shimmer. Mayor Hendricks quickly began calculating the political benefits of being photographed with a genuine war hero. The local news crew that had arrived began setting up for what would become the lead story on every channel in Arizona. Tank Morrison, still handcuffed, finally found his voice. "This is insane. You can't just—" "Actually," interrupted a new voice, "they can." FBI Special Agent Sarah Chen had been monitoring military aircraft in the Southwest when the Black Hawks appeared on radar. What had started as a routine investigation into unauthorized flight patterns had quickly escalated when facial recognition software identified several passengers as persons of interest, not criminals, but high-value military assets with security clearances that made her boss's boss nervous. "Agent Chen, FBI," she announced, her badge glinting in the afternoon sun. "I need to understand what kind of operation we're looking at here." Harper stepped forward. "No operation, ma'am, just some veterans helping out a friend." "Sentinel Vets," she said, reading from her phone. "Private military contractor based out of Nevada. Current contracts include embassy security in 14 countries and anti-piracy operations in the Indian Ocean." She looked up. "You boys are expensive." "Worth every penny," Jack said quietly. Agent Chen studied the scene. The helicopters, the perfectly orchestrated response, the way 8 highly trained operators had materialized in the middle of nowhere within minutes of a beacon activation. This was a test, wasn't it? The question caught everyone off guard. "A field test of response times, communications, and operational readiness," she continued. "You've been planning this." Jack met her gaze steadily. "Agent Chen, I'm a 71-year-old man who gets winded walking upstairs. I came here for my inhaler medication and ended up on the ground. If that was planned, I'm a better actor than I thought." But something in his eyes suggested otherwise. Agent Chen had interviewed enough operators to recognize the look of someone who was always 3 moves ahead. The crowd was growing restless, sensing undercurrents they couldn't quite grasp. The live stream had over 50,000 viewers now. #VeteranJustice was trending on Twitter. Cable news producers were frantically booking segments about military brotherhood and forgotten heroes.
Tank Morrison had been loaded into a patrol car, still protesting his innocence in an assault that had been recorded by a dozen phones. But the real drama was playing out between Agent Chen and the man everyone was now calling the General. "There's something you're not telling me," she said.
Jack smiled, the first genuine smile he'd shown all day. "Agent Chen, I spent 43 years in the Army. There's a lot I'm not telling you." The crowd laughed, the tension breaking for a moment. But Agent Chen wasn't satisfied. Her instincts, honed by years of investigating everything from corporate espionage to domestic terrorism, were screaming that this elaborate display of military precision was about more than just helping an old veteran. "Miguel," Jack said quietly to Harper, "I think it's time we wrap this up. The good people of Pine Creek have seen enough excitement for one day." Harper nodded and signaled to his team. With the same fluid precision they'd shown arriving, the 8 operators began moving toward their aircraft. The crowd started to disperse, many still filming, others already posting their videos to social media. But Agent Chen wasn't done. "General Cross, I'm going to need to file a report about today's events. Military aircraft, armed personnel, what appears to be a coordinated response to a civilian incident." "Of course," Jack said, "though I suspect your report might be classified above your clearance level once certain people review it." The statement was delivered casually, but it hit Agent Chen like a physical blow. She'd been investigating unauthorized military activity. But what if the activity was authorized, just not by anyone she had access to? "What exactly are you saying?" Jack was already walking toward the pharmacy to collect his prescription. "I'm saying that some of us never really retire, Agent Chen. We just change our uniforms." As the Blackhawks lifted off, their rotor wash sending dust and debris swirling through the parking lot, Agent Chen watched Jack disappear into the pharmacy. Just another old man in a faded cap picking up his medication. But her phone was already buzzing with calls from Washington. The facial recognition hits on the Sentinel Vets team had triggered automatic alerts to the Pentagon, the CIA, and several agencies she didn't even recognize. Whatever had just happened in Pine Creek, Arizona, was about to become someone else's problem. Inside the pharmacy, Jack handed his insurance card to the nervous teenager behind the counter. The same girl who had watched him get beaten was now staring at him with something approaching awe. "Are you really a general?" she whispered. "Was," Jack corrected gently, "long time ago." "But those men, they came for you, just like that?" Jack signed for his inhaler, his arthritic fingers moving slowly across the electronic pad. "Sometimes, honey, the most important battles happen after the war is over." He walked back outside, where Mayor Hendricks was giving an impromptu interview to the news crew. She was already spinning the story, talking about Pine Creek's proud tradition of supporting veterans and her administration's commitment to military families. Agent Chen was still there, talking quietly into her phone. When she saw Jack, she ended her call and approached him. "General, I just got off the phone with my supervisor. It seems your file is above my security clearance." "That's unfortunate," Jack said, mildly. "What I don't understand is why someone with your background is living in a nothing town in the middle of nowhere. No offense to Pine Creek, but you could be anywhere. Pentagon advisory boards, defense contractors, consulting?" "Agent Chen," Jack interrupted, "do you know how many veterans are homeless in this country?" The question seemed to come from nowhere. No, sir." 38,000, give or take. "How many commit suicide every day?" "I don't." 22, every single day." Jack's voice carried a weight that made the desert heat seem cool by comparison. "How many are struggling with PTSD, addiction, unemployment, or just trying to figure out who they are when nobody needs them to kill people anymore?" Agent Chen was quiet now, recognizing that she was getting a glimpse behind a curtain she hadn't known existed. "I live here," Jack continued, "because this is where I'm needed. Not in some Pentagon conference room or corporate boardroom, but here, where old soldiers come to disappear. And Sentinel vets? Insurance policy for all of us. Jack Cross had never been a victim that day. He had been the architect of his own theater, the director of his own drama, the general commanding his own perfectly orchestrated campaign. The random encounter with Tank Morrison wasn't random at all. The biker had been carefully profiled, his routine studied, his psychological triggers mapped and exploited through a series of seemingly coincidental provocations that led him exactly where Jack needed him to be, exactly when Jack needed him there. The beacon wasn't an emergency signal. It was the go code for the most sophisticated veteran advocacy operation in American history.
Bye.